So by now you should have completed this table using the textbook in class. The purpose of this video is to go over the table. As we go over, I will explain things and I will be going back and forth to the textbook to show you some nice diagrams. So first off, just to summarize, here we have a table that basically summarizes all the organs of the digestive system and what they do. So we start with the organ here, the type of digestion that happens in that organ, the role, what it does exactly, the enzymes and secretions. Now, what are enzymes? Enzymes are molecules or proteins that help a chemical reaction happen. They help speed up chemical reactions. And in this case, in our digestive system, they assist in breaking down food into nutrients or molecules. Secretions are things that are secreted or things that are released or created somewhere in the digestive system. We call those secretions. Lastly, the last column shows us what nutrient is being digested or helps to be digested in that particular organ. So we'll start with the mouth. In the mouth, there is mechanical digestion, which is basically the teeth cutting your food. In the mouth, there is also chemical digestion. And what's happening here is that this is, at this point, it's where starch or carbohydrates are starting to be broken down into sugar. This happens with the help of saliva. Saliva is a watery substance that is secreted by your salivary glands. And in your saliva, there's an enzyme called amylase, which is basically, like I said, a protein that helps break down the carbohydrates into sugar. You can test this yourself by eating like a salty cracker, and just if you keep chewing it in your mouth without swallowing it, you just keep chewing it and covering it with saliva, you'll notice that the cracker will start to taste sweet. And that's basically because your saliva, or the amylase in your saliva, is starting to break down the carbohydrates into sugar. Remember, we said carbohydrates are made up of molecules of sugar. If we go to our textbook for a second, you'll see this nice diagram with your salivary glands here, these glands that are in yellow, under your tongue, towards the back of your mouth, and on the back of your mouth and your upper jaw. Again, these are just glands. You don't really need to know them. I just wanted to show you this picture. Glands that secrete saliva and help with chemical digestion. If we go back to our table, we'll start with the esophagus. Now, the esophagus, no digestion takes place there. It's simply a tube that allows the food to move from the mouth to the stomach. This is done through a process called peristalsis, which is basically the esophagus with its muscles squeezing the food downwards towards the stomach. What it does have, though, is mucus. And you saw that video on mucus. Mucus just simply helps the food move through the esophagus with the help of peristalsis. Okay, there's no digestion that takes place in the esophagus whatsoever. Now, if we go to our next page, we have the stomach. In the stomach, there are also two types of digestion. One is mechanical, and the other is chemical. In mechanical digestion, your stomach muscles help to churn the food or to mix the food. Basically, the combination of this mixing with the hydrochloric acid that is found in the stomach helps melt the food and give it a liquid consistency. This in turn helps chemical digestion happen. Chemical digestion in your stomach, proteins start to be broken down into amino acid, and this happens with the help of pepsin and hydrochloric acid. Together, these two help break down proteins into amino acids. So proteins are broken down into amino acids in the stomach. Now, in order to protect itself from the acid, the stomach also secretes mucus. The mucus is there to protect the lining of the stomach from the acid because it is quite strong, and without it, we basically burn a hole in the tissue of the stomach. Now, if we go to our textbook, you see here a nice little diagram of the stomach. You can see that the muscles of the stomach, they're not all in one direction, they're in different directions. And as they contract, these contractions help mix the food again and create a more liquidy substance. This churning, as we call it, in combination with the acid, as we mentioned before, helps again liquefy our food and helps in chemical digestion. With the small intestine, we have chemical digestion, and we also have absorption. In the small intestine, there's the chemical digestion of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. There are a number of different enzymes, the names which you do not need to know, but there are various enzymes that are secreted that help in the digestion of the three main nutrients. Absorption happens in the small intestine, where the nutrients that have been digested are now absorbed into your bloodstream. You will remember from the gizmo that the capillaries had to be found around the small intestine because that is where most of the absorption takes place. Also, you may ask yourself now, why is the small intestine 6 meters long? And based on what you know about digestion, what can you conclude? Well, if chemical digestion happens in the small intestine and absorption happens in the small intestine, well, we need to have it to be that long in order for absorption to be maximized. So you want as many of the nutrients as possible digested and absorbed into your system. The liver is one of those secondary organs that the food doesn't necessarily pass through, but the liver is important because it produces bile. Bile is then stored in the gallbladder. Now, what is bile? It's basically a substance that's created in the liver, and it helps break down fat. So it's a substance that helps in the digestion of fat. Okay, so once again, the liver, food does not pass through the liver. Food simply produces bile, which is stored in the gallbladder until it's needed, and this helps in the digestion of fat. Now, again, if we go to our textbook, excuse me, if you go to the textbook and I find the right page, sorry for the delay here. This is a nice little diagram of the liver here. Okay, this kind of triangular organ. You can see the gallbladder, which is the screen here. It's a little pouch that basically collects the bile once it's made by the liver. And when the small intestine is ready to receive the bile, a small passageway here will allow the gallbladder to squirt the bile into the small intestine in order for chemical digestion to happen. Now, if we continue a little bit, we have the pancreas, which is another organ where no digestion takes place. Food does not pass through the pancreas. However, the pancreas does produce a number of different enzymes that help in the digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. The enzymes are transported to the small intestine through small tubes, similar to what we saw. Can't really see them here, but similar to what we saw with the gallbladder. The pancreas will make these enzymes, and when they're needed by the small intestines, small tubes will allow the enzymes to enter the small intestine. And the enzymes of the pancreas basically help us to digest carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Lastly, the large intestine. The large intestine is mostly responsible for absorption. It mainly absorbs water into the blood. Also in the large intestine, there are actually bacteria that we live with. And these bacteria basically feed off of the waste in your large intestine and create vitamin K, which is then absorbed into your body. You may read that vitamin K is helpful in bone formation, as well as in blood clotting. In other words,